Hey folks, I am Becky with Enduring Finances. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to take you through the decision-making process that I had when I was trying to decide if I was going to go short-term or long-term with my rental house and the factors that impacted my decision moving with that. So when I first started looking at my house, I had just barely started dating my girlfriend at the time. And we had just barely moved in together. And she had a house completely established. She didn't need a whole lot of furniture, so a lot of stuff was going to be remaining at the house. And I had the biggest choice between having a long-term tenant that is unfurnished, that is like a traditional move-in, live there for 6 months, a year, or maybe even a few years, or I could rent it out as a furnished house, either for long-term, mid-term, or short-term. And I decided to take the furnished route. I had a ton of furniture there, and I started buying additional furniture to kind of make it into a complete house since I was just a single person living there. But let's look into the different factors that kind of impacted that decision to rent it out short-term / mid-term as a furnished house. The biggest decisions that really impacted that was the flexibility that it provided, the potential greater profit that I could make from doing that. The necessary house improvements and the ability to do that when I needed and not have a huge impact in a tenant stay. And then security of retaining the house in a short-term, mid-term basis and not for a year-long contract where I could potentially be, out of a house if things didn't work out. So as far as flexibility goes, right now I am in school, going to BSU. I'm going to be doing that for the next couple of years. So the idea that living, 45 minutes away from where the house is at, I'm already going to be going downtown to go to school a couple of days a week. So it would be really easy for me to add that level in of going in and cleaning the house and flipping it, changing it over so that the next tenant or short-term person that's staying there can stay that next night. So it really made it a potential that could happen because I didn't have a full-time job and I wasn't working other than this. So that's kind of the flexibility where I was on my side to be able to do this without having it really impact my life. As far as potential profit, that's where it kind of gets into the really big aspects of the differences between long-term and short-term renting. Each one has pros and cons, and I'm sure you can imagine them. The pros and cons of doing a short-term rental is the flexibility, higher profit margin because you can get more people in at a higher price. You have more flexibility with repairs, which is important to me. There are less regulations that you have to follow as far as being a landlord, and security deposits are needed there through the service if you need them. The cons to having a short-term rental is you're not guaranteed that steady stream of income that you are with a long-term rental. The market is incredibly competitive, but you could say that for long-term housing as well. There are really high operating expenses. It is costly to clean and change out linens and do all of this for short-term tenants. And then because you are operating a short-term rental, there typically, depending on where you live, are additional taxes that you are required to pay and licenses that you need in order to operate within certain city limits. And because it is short-term rental and you're constantly cleaning and changing out for new tenants, it is very hands-on and more time-consuming than a long-term rental. But one of the pros and cons of a long-term rental is you have that steady income. With a long-term rental, you have a tenant that could be in there for 6 months, a year, 2 to 5 to 10 years even. They pay the utilities. There's less to manage. You're not going in every week or every couple days to clean. You don't have to have furniture in there. And there's a security deposit that you can use to clean when they leave because you'll probably need to do it. Some of the cons for a long-term rental are lower income. It's going to be less money for them to rent for longer periods of time. There's a lower profit margin because of that. There are stricter regulations as far as you as a landlord having long-term tenants staying at your residence. That can mean that there are tenant problems and issues that you run into. There's going to be evictions, there's going to be major damage, major repairs that are needed, and all of those are very costly. So that's just kind of the breakdown of the pros and cons for doing a short-term rental and a long-term rental. But the finances is kind of really what we're going for on this. I went and did a broad-based look at the market of where my house is located in Boise, Idaho. I looked at doing an unfurnished long-term traditional rental, doing a short-term rental, a mid-term rental, and that's between, Furnished Finders is more mid-term, 1 month plus, usually like a month to 3 months. Airbnb and VRBO on the short-term side of things, and I got this breakdown here. So for a traditional house rented out, I have a 2-bedroom, 1 bath. It would be $1,600 a month in rent coming in. On Furnished Finder, that would be $2,000 a month, give or take. On Airbnb, it could be $2,900 a month, and then on VRBO, it could be $3,000 a month. But each one of these have different fees that come into play. For traditional units, you can list it for free on Zillow and a couple different apps, so you don't really have that cost. For Furnished Finder, I'm paying $149 a year to list the house through their service, but they do offer $1 million liability coverage for any damage that happens to the house. Airbnb charges a 3% fee for any bookings that I have, so they take 3% of my earnings on anyone that stays at my house, and VRBO takes 8%, so a bigger chunk of it comes out of VRBO. With Airbnb and VRBO and Furnished Finder, all of these mid to short-term rentals, I can charge a cleaning fee, I can charge host fees, I can do various things with that. With a traditional rental, you're not really charging a cleaning fee. That's all going to be wrapped up in that security deposit, which you can use if there's extensive damage, but that's typically regulated to, you can't use an exuberant amount for that. So it's usually first a 1 whole month's rent, so about $1,600. Cleaning fees, what I'm estimating I'm going to be charging through Furnished Finder is about $100 for stay, and that is, they're usually staying a month plus, so that makes sense. For Airbnb, it's $25. It costs me $15 in gas just to drive out there. And then VRBO does not do cleaning fees, it does host fees, but I'm going to do the same thing, $25. Considering cleaning fee, it costs me $15 just to get out there and clean it. Furnished Finder does allow you to do security deposits, so I'm thinking about a $500 security deposit with that, and then about $150 for a pet security deposit. Same with renting traditionally. If there's any extensive damage based off of just the pet, redoing the carpets mainly, I have that set up. And then the other big expense that really comes into play is the utilities. With a traditional rental, you're going to be covering pretty much, you have the option to choose to cover all the rent, all the utilities, or none of the utilities, or a mix. Typically what I've seen is you cover everything except for electric and water, because those are the two that tend to really go. So electricity and water. So for me, I would not include those if I was renting this out as a traditional house. With Furnished Finder and Airbnb and VRBO, the mid and short-term ones, I have to cover all of those because I don't have a tenant long enough in there to set up an account through, the different utility companies and take on that management aspect of it. So those are all going to be fees that I'm going to have to cover for a midterm and short-term versus a long-term rental. And so then I went down and I said, okay, if I had somebody stay in each one of these different things for 30 days, what would it be after, listing fees and cleaning fees and utilities and all the things? How much could I potentially earn from this? And so I went ahead and did an estimate. So for a traditional long-term rent, I could make maybe $1,600 for 30 days. For Furnished Finder, it would come to $2,087.58. For Airbnb, $2,837.25. And for VRBO, I could earn $2,783. And this is based on someone staying 30 days continuously in these units. That doesn't take into effect that Airbnb is going to have potentially different people coming in. I've got people that are staying 1 night, 2 nights, 2 weeks, and each time someone stays, that cleaning fee is applied. So it could be slightly higher, could be slightly lower. Same with VRBO. But easily, just looking at that, you can see that Airbnb would pay the most potentially And then I kind of wanted to look at it a different way, because 30 days is a lot for Airbnb. I don't even need someone to stay 30 full days to be able to cover all of the expenses that I have for it. So I kind of wanted to look at it for 15 days. So if someone stays at my house for half of the month, what does that look like compared between these four? About $800 from a traditional long-term rental, $1,087 for Furnish Finder, $1,430 from Airbnb, and then $1,403 from VRBO. And that is just based off of someone potentially staying there for 15 days out of the month, and how much that would potentially pay out without taking in any other expenses besides these and taxes, which are a big impact in this. So clearly we can see if we had, half a month on Furnish Finder or half a month of renting out long-term traditional, Airbnb is still a safer route to go because I can pay most of my expenses with that. So then I did an estimation of how much it costs for me to keep the property up and running and paying for my mortgage and all the utilities and everything else right now. And I estimated that it takes me about $1,600 a month to keep the house up and running if someone was staying there with internet and using electricity a lot, estimating high on electricity and high on water. That's how much I could estimate to see every single month coming out of my expenses to keep the property running. So if I had long-term traditional renters, we can take out water and electricity, and that brings it down a lot, but it's still $1,300 a month, which is quite a bit of money. So for me, there's a lot of different variables that go into that. That comes in mind that these estimates that I have as far as what I could potentially see do not include any damage or maintenance or cleaning that I have to do other than the cleaning fees that's covered there. I could have a tenant that stays a long time and I could have really big repairs. I could have to repaint walls, redo drywall, but that could go for short-term tenant as well because they could have a party, they could do damage as well. But both of these avenues, long-term or mid to short-term, have security deposits or abilities to potentially get money back from the individual for the damage. But that's the big finance breakdown. I wanted to touch base on why the ability to improve the house and having that flexibility to do it was also a big factor. The house that I own is really old. It was built in the 1960s. It has a lot of things that are wrong with it. I've talked about it before, and we've done quite a few updates on redoing the house, but one of the biggest things is electrical. I need to redo all the electrical in that house, pull it all out, and redo every single thing. The old school single room AC unit that I had in the wall died. So for right now, there's no AC in the main house, so I need to put in an AC unit. Luckily, there's already an air duct system through the first part of the house, but not the second addition that was built. The sprinkler system is not set up. I have to put that in the front yard. We took out the stump. That was the big thing we needed beforehand. But put in a sprinkler system so that the lawn can stay green, because I do have irrigation rights. So the lawn can stay green all year round, and I can keep that up. And then I have the big lake in my front driveway every time it floods, because it's not paved, it's not gravel, it's just what it is, and every time it rains it just becomes this massive puddle. So I need to fix the driveway too. The back deck, I painted it. We probably have a couple good years on it, but it's a ticking time bomb. It's going to need to replace. I'm going to need to put in, the idea is to put in a patio in the backyard. And then we get into like the really big expensive one is previous owners did an addition to the house and they didn't do it very well. And there's a sagging wall, I need to put in a support beam, and then long term, that all needs to come out and be redone because it was absolutely done terribly. All in all, there's just a ton of work that still needs to be done in bringing the house up to full tip-top shape. And if I can go in periodically and do updates, have someone not stay for a week at a time and do a big update, that would be it would be very beneficial to me and easier on tenants than having them have workers there doing all this, or potentially missing an entire month of rent because we need to do updates. And then the last big factor that impacted my decision was having home security. Like I mentioned, when I first started looking at this, I had just moved in with my girlfriend. Since then, we've gotten engaged and we are moving forward with that. But that was a factor that really needed to be important to me, because going into this, if things did not work out in the relationship, I needed to have something that I could fall back on, and housing is very expensive. Having a house that I could go back to, even, if it took me a month, was better than a year. So that was a big factor that impacted my decision as well, the flexibility to potentially return back home if needed. Based off of all the data and all the different factors that I looked at, and some more that I didn't list here, I ranked my decision like this. Top 1 is midterm rentals. Furnish Finder is my biggest one that I'm looking for there. Trying to have someone stay 30 days or longer, but not usually more than a couple months. It's in between the two. Less money than Airbnb and VRBO, but more money than a traditional renter, and there's some flexibility there. Second choice is a short-term rental through Airbnb first, and then if need be VRBO, just based off their fee breakdown. Now, I just have people on Airbnb staying. I have not had a tenant from Furnish Finder yet, so Airbnb is kind of holding up the charge, but that's kind of the second tier. I would choose midterm over short-term. And then the third choice, if the first two ones don't work out, is go to a long-term tenant who stays in with a long contract, hopefully 6 months, a year at a time, and have steady month income coming in from there. The good thing is I don't have to pick a course and stay to it for the entire time. I can adjust if needed, just like I'm doing already, because I haven't booked someone through a midterm rental service. I'm doing short-term, and if I get a midterm, that'll be great, and I can work in between with short-term. And if all of these don't work, I can switch gears, sell everything, and go long-term with tenants who take over utilities and all the things. But that's kind of what drove my decision making, and how I kind of looked at what I wanted to do with the rental house moving forward. So hopefully that makes sense to you, and maybe it helps you kind of work through some thought process in your own head if this is something that you're thinking about doing with your own home or at home in the future. If you have any questions or comments or anything you'd like to add, feel free to drop a comment down below or reach out to me, and I will do my best to answer or get back to you. But until next time, folks, I'll talk to you later.